Donald Trump, our 45th president of the United States, always believed in putting the interests of the Americans first in the world platform with his America First philosophy.
And yes, together, we will make America great again.
But what if I told you that Donald Trump saw the Great Reset coming and tried to stop every bit of it with his policies? So what did Trump try to do to stop the Great Reset's agenda from ever unfolding? And something tells me that he himself knew that it was too late to stop it.
This is the most deceptive, vicious world.
But let's go ahead and unpack the key policies that Trump tried to enact and therefore would oppose the Great Reset's agenda and the narrative. The first one is gun control, or should I say more freedom of gun ownership. Now, for you freedom lovers out there, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's more to this than you think. In 2019 and 2020, right at the start of phase 1 of the Great Reset, both New Zealand and Canada banned a list of semi-automatic rifles. And as mentioned in my last video, both prime ministers of New Zealand and Canada are part of the World Economic Forum and are avid supporters of total authoritarianism.
Admiration I actually have for China.
Fast forward to February 2022, we witnessed a government protest in Canada like never before. I mean, these are Canadians that we're talking about. It's not like they're having some kind of polite protest here. These folks were angry about the government overreach.
We'll give you something to cry about.
Here in the United States, our Second Amendment to the Constitution guarantees an unalienable right to bear arms specifically against a tyrannical government. Should our government try to act cute and start restricting our freedoms, the people will most likely rise up with actual firearms to stop the government from doing so. But unfortunately for Canada, their freedom to bear arms have been cut down severely to where mounting a resistance against tyranny will become more and more difficult. Now back to Donald Trump, he was certainly a pro-firearm figure and also even rolled back some of the Barack Obama's policies about gun control. And he even tried to eliminate the gun-free zones in schools and military bases. You know, what's really funny about these gun-free zones is that real criminals don't really care. I mean, they're gonna look at the sticker and be like, oh my gosh, gun-free zone sticker, I can't go in. Oh man, this sticker has so much power over me. No, they're gonna clearly bust in there because they know in their psychology that everyone inside won't have guns.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang!
So if you've been paying attention to our videos lately, we're currently in phase 2 of the Great Reset, where the governments around the world is seeking to consolidate more and more power and authority while restricting the freedoms of their citizens. Therefore, keeping our government accountable is certainly a priority to stop the Great Reset. After all, governments should be serving its people, not the other way around.
I'm a taxpayer. You work for me.
The next thing that Trump's tried to do to stop the Great Reset was to bolster the United States military. Now, Trump had a goal of increasing the active duty members of the U.S. Army personnel to 540,000 people from about 475,000 where it stands. But not only that, but to add more battalions to the Marine Corps. And enlarge the naval fleet size to 355, which we're currently standing about 300. And I would argue for the United States, the Navy is probably the most important department as it needs to defend both seas, Atlantic and Pacific, from foreign threats. And that's coming from a former Army guy. There you go, Navy. You can have that one.
Hey.
Now, overall with the military, this is really important to the Great Reset agenda. Not because the US is going to get invaded or will enter another war, it has to do with currency. You see, ever since the US dollar came off the gold standards back in 1971, the US dollar was simply backed by the trust and the credit of the United States government. Now, I expanded on this a little bit while talking about the potential for a dollar collapse as part of the Great Reset narrative. But the only thing that is coming between the enemies of the United States and the dollar is the United States military. Both Russia and China wants to get up the US dollar as the world trades currency. Both Russia and China wants to expand its territories as evident by the current situation in Ukraine and potentially Taiwan. What's really restricting for both countries right now is the fact that the US has a tight rein on the world's trade policy. So to ultimately deter the adversaries of the United States, a large military and strong nuclear arsenal is needed to ward off any potential threat to the United States economy, both domestic and foreign. However, in the contrary, the Great Reset's agenda is to consolidate the world's currency into one, thus potentially eliminating the US dollar's influence around the world. Therefore, weakening the US military certainly means weakening the US dollar.
Drill Sergeant, I dropped my grenade somewhere over there.
See what I'm talking about?
And Trump understood that the US military presence around the world kept the adversaries in check and made sure that any preemptive attack on the US and its interests would be stopped earlier on.
We have invested a record-breaking $2.2 trillion in the United States military.
But moving on, the next set of policies that Trump really wanted to push forward is to really cut back on regulation in general. He did enact a policy in 2017 that would cut 2 regulations for every 1 new regulation would be passed. Donald Trump would describe regulations as stealth taxation.
Regulation is stealth taxation.
Which in many ways is kind of true. For example, as a real estate investor myself, anytime I'm looking at a big renovation project, I would have to go through a massive red tape such as permits and inspections. Now, of course, this is done to make sure that my work is done safely and up to code. But however, in places like California, it is virtually impossible to build any new homes without having to pay a massive amount of fees to do pretty much anything. It's probably why homes cost so much in California, as inventory is constantly being suppressed and the cost to build is ridiculously high. I wake up every single morning thanking God that I don't live in the most terrible state like California. I just live in the 3rd most terrible state. Now, how this connects back to the Great Reset is regulations give government more control and more power. Normally, less regulations mean less on what our governments can do with our private ownership. So in order for the Great Reset's agenda of you will own nothing and you will be happy to ultimately come true, it can't happen with less regulation. It would have to be under the pretext of more regulation and more control for the government. Now, here's a bit of a surprising twist when I was doing this research for this topic. It's true that Donald Trump did in fact speak at the World Economic Forum back in January 2018, but his speech is nevertheless the antithesis to that of the Great Reset. In fact, the other members of the World Economic Forum wasn't always appreciative of Trump when he first became president in 2016.
Well, I have described him as an imposter and con man and a would-be dictator.
And Trump does have a profile with the World Economic Forum with literally just a single article written about him. And he didn't even write it. But compare that to Justin Trudeau, boy, did they write an entire book for him. Nevertheless, the power behind the Great Reset certainly did not want Donald Trump to be president again due to the incompatibility of his policies with that of the Great Reset. Now, there are 3 phases of the Great Reset, and we're simply in phase 2 right now. So if you're wondering what the 3 phases are of the Great Reset, click on this video right here. We're going to explain what the 3 phases are of the Great Reset and how it's unfolding and in what order.